I promised to address any questions that came up from last week, or try to, at least. Last week we were talking about, broadly speaking, we were talking about homosexuality and how the problem with that is not, the problem with it, right? How do you define that? If we look at that whole thing, that whole situation, the problem is that doesn't define anyone's identity, right? So one of the things that we need to take responsibility for, right, to acknowledge, is that the church has often not dealt with this very well, right? So what the church tends to do is to define itself, or at least in the past, a lot of times has done, is it sort of defines itself as the nice people, right? Think about how the word Christian is used, right? It's often used just to mean, a decent, respectable person. Well, I'm a Christian, right? Or he's a Christian. And that isn't saying anything about what he believes or the way he lives, except that it's outwardly sort of respectable, right? So homosexuality isn't the only place where this is a problem, but it's one of the big places, right? Because, if we take a look at the Bible, we can say that it's wrong to act that way. But we cannot say that it's any more wrong than other things, right? So there are certain kind of respectable sins, a lot of in the way we think a lot of times. Have you ever respectable sins? Have you, well, yeah. I mean, have you ever heard a sermon condemning or even pointing out the sin of gossip?
Yeah.
Good. From me? No. Okay. All right. I have pointed it out in the past, but my point is that there are some sins that we don't talk about very much because they don't seem as bad, right? So I'm glad you've heard a sermon on that. I expect you to say no, because I'm not sure I have. So if we, in human terms, there are sins with worse consequences. And for those of you listening at home, I'm using scare quotes, air scare quotes. So obviously, I mean, the thing that people will immediately bring up is, why do we have different levels of murder, right? Because some are worse than others. Well, yes, in human terms and in terms of their immediate results, yes, we could say certain things have worse immediate results than other things, right? But in terms of our relationship to God, sin is sin, right? Yeah. Yeah, I would say sin is the thing that separates us from God, right? So and that's a whole. I mean, we could go off. We could do a whole session on trying to define sin, but yeah, that's part of what sin does. Is it separates us from the original relationship that we should have had with God, right? That we were created to have with God. So if that's the case. And we know, I mean, y'all heard my sermon this morning, right? St. Paul points out that, no one's righteous. It's only by the blood of Jesus that we get back to a right state at all. And so, so we Christians ought to have a sort of funny relationship with sin, right? On the one hand, we ought not to let it take any power over us, right? I mean, when I'm dealing with people who have things that are not respectable that they're dealing with, like they're having trouble with alcohol, right? Which is a non-sexual, but still kind of one of those things where you go, yeah, that's not okay, right? And so I'm not sure I want my kids around you, right? But why? Right? Sin is sin. Now, if someone is simply untrustworthy, then that's one thing, right? But if you're just dealing with, I have trouble with this temptation, right? Well, I don't care what it is, right? I have temptations I struggle with. Y'all have temptations you struggle with. It shouldn't matter what they are, right? So getting back to sort of homosexuality, the church has not always done that very well, because we should be able to say, well, sin is sin, big deal, right? At the same time, we say perfection is the goal. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like I'm losing you. Are there questions? Are you?
Perfection is the goal.
Perfection is the goal. So the reason no one's righteous is because none of us have performed perfectly morally, right? And so all of us are condemned. So on the one hand, we should say, oh, you're a sinner? Great, welcome. Come on in. Me too. Right? See what I mean? If we're pretending to be the righteous people here in the church, which sometimes is what ends up happening, right? Then that's going to be a problem. That's actually going to do the opposite of what we need to do. Yeah.
But the difference is, I think, that if you have a problem with alcohol or whatever,
Sure.
know it's a problem. You
Right.
may not be succeeding.
Yes.
Whereas some people say homosexuality is not a problem.
Right.
It's a good thing.
Right.
There should be. It's not a sin.
So this is where I'm going, right? Is we ought to be able to say, hey, you're a sinner, us too, come on in. We got this solution, right? On the other hand, we need to be able to say, God is perfect. We need to be perfect too, right? But that doesn't give any of us any room to speak badly about any of the rest of us, right? Or to treat anyone differently, okay? The question, which Valerie has just brought up, is really not the one of whether you're a sinner or whether you're a saint, right? The question is whether you are willing to take on those temptations, right? Now, for some of us, it's easier to pretend that we are, right? Because our temptations are things that are more hidden or seem smaller in human terms, right? And for some of us, that's really hard. Well, yes. So the problem is that, so let me give you what I think is sort of the historical kind of flow, okay? And obviously, whenever you do this sort of thing, you're oversimplifying, of course. But basically what happened, I think, again, understanding that I'm way oversimplifying, is that the church lost sight, largely, of its mission to invite sinners to be redeemed by Jesus, right? And it started doing a different job, right? It started doing the job of being the sort of cultural, moral police, right? Now, don't get me wrong. We need to be clear about what's right and what's wrong. That's one thing. But it's a different thing to start treating people badly because they don't live up to something, right? Again, we're all sinners. Okay, so with people who are well, we're all broken, right? Some people are broken in this particular way, that somehow, whether it's partly genetic or not, whether it is, I happen to believe it has to do mostly with family relationships growing up, and I have a whole theory about that. But in any case, some people are broken in this particular way, that their desires and emotions aren't calibrated to the male-female thing. Right. Well, their desires are not. So that's not. I would say that's not just physical, right? I mean, I think we are all broken and looking for love, right? And we all need that love in some particular way. Does that make sense? Like, each of us has particular needs in that regard, right? Well, some people feel the need for that, say, if you're a man, right, feel the need for that masculine love that maybe they didn't get from a father, or sometimes that's not the cause, right? But it's somehow you get that need for masculine love rather than feminine love, okay? Or the other way around, right? Which I think has a completely, well, a similar but different etiology. Okay. But the question is not whether you have those things. I mean, if we all sit here and sort of, if I led you on a guided meditation into your sexual depravities, right? I mean, there's going to be something, right? It might seem silly or it might not, but, you know, I think we've all got something, right? And I don't think any of us really want to talk about it, okay? But people who have this desire for sexual involvement between people of the same sex often also have kind of a social aspect to that, right? So think about, and not all homosexual people are like this, right? But we have the stereotypes that come from somewhere, right? About the effeminate man, right? Or the more masculine woman, right? And that desire is for love is so central to us, right? That it just gets mixed up with our identity and who we think we are. And if you are told, no, you cannot have that kind of love, right? Then that drives you to despair. And, right? So all of these things kind of come into play, particularly with homosexuality. So the church should be a place where we can offer people grace over that, right? I have a good friend who is the church musician at the church that sponsored me for ordination. And he teaches at the Pittsburgh Performing Arts High School, right? He's probably about 70 now. And he is one of those, you could tell right away. He's very flamboyant, and, you know, he gives great hugs, and he's got this long white hair, and he's a musician, and you could just tell, right? But he has found the church, not through his whole life, right? But in the end has found the church to be the place where he can say, hey, look guys, you know, I have these weird temptations. So guess what? I'm a sinner too. And look, guys, this is not going to be good for you. Don't follow through on that. Let me tell you, right? He's a very, very faithful Christian man. Now, I wonder if in certain places at certain times, actually I don't wonder, I know that at certain places and at certain times, he would not have been welcome, right, among certain Christians, which should be horrific to us, right? But because of all of that, right, we have driven a bunch of people like in this cultural direction. When I say we, I just mean the church, right? We have sort of driven people in this cultural direction of saying, no, guess what? This is who I am. Deal with it, right? Which at one level makes perfect sense, right? On the other hand, I'm not defining myself by my own sexual depravities. I'm not allowing that to define me. And if I did, that would take me down a very, very dark hole, right? And so it does with these guys and gals, right? Whether they realize that or not, right? I mean, we don't always recognize that we're in a deep, dark hole when we are, right? I think we've all had that experience.
When we have confession and it says, I thought, word, and deed,
Yeah.
it covers everything.
Right.
And when it's thoughts, if it's in your mind and you think of something
Right.
and you know that's not what you should be thinking about.
Right.
Many times I've had to say, get thou behind me, Satan.
Right, absolutely.
And, you kind of move on from that and put it out of your head.
Right.
And
we need to be able to tell people that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To tell people, hey, that's sin.
Yeah.
Ha! How about it? You're a sinner too. Big deal.
And the question,
Right?
the question for me is
Get beyond it.
is how do you deal with somebody that is homosexual?
Uh-huh.
And you know that, and
Uh-huh.
you know that.
Yeah.
And you can't just gloss over it if there's something that's
Right.
going on.
So,
And you
I mean,
talk about it.
this,
How do you attempt to-
yeah, this gets to be a very hard thing, right? I'll get back to you, Suzelle, because I want to answer this question, but then I'll get to you. This is a very hard thing because we have been kind of defined culturally out of bounds, right? Now, there was a time when we might have been able to correct this. We who believe the Bible, right, have been kind of defined culturally out of bounds, right? We have lost the, I was going to say the moral high ground, but we lost that long ago. What I really mean is we've lost the right, to define these things culturally, right? So now, it used to be nice people go to church. Now it is nice people don't go to church, right? If you go to church, you must be mean. I mean, just watch TV, right? This is what you will find out. And you know what? That's not entirely untrue, right?
We're just
Neither,
that we're mean.
right? Neither was it entirely true before that if you went to church you were nice, right? So these are cultural sort of definitions that we work within, right, when we deal with other people. Now the problem is now, if we even question that, then we're already by definition being mean and cruel, right? Well, so we have to reject that and say, we're not being cruel. You can reject us if you want, or at least we're not trying to be cruel, right? Sin hurts. Ours hurts us, yours hurts you. We love you enough to tell you the truth, right? And that doesn't mean we cut you out of our lives, right? It also doesn't mean that we can condone what the larger culture believes is right, right? So, I am in the same pickle that you're describing, just like I'm sure everybody else is at some point in their lives. So I'm Jenny's stepsister was married, and for those of you listening at home, I'm using scare quotes again, to a woman in Canada, right? We like them, right? There's nothing about them that we have any personal problem with, right? But we couldn't go to that so-called marriage, right? And so Jenny had to call her stepsister and say, so, I can't come, and this is why, and it doesn't mean we don't love you, but we can't participate in something we believe is wrong, right? So now we have this weird situation where she and her family, right, her wife and their child now, and that's a whole nother story, right? But yes, it raises questions. But live in Ottawa and we live in Texas, and whenever we get the family together, which isn't very often, we have this. I have this strange interaction with Manon, her so-called wife, right? Because she doesn't know what to do with me because I'm being nice to her. But I wouldn't go to her wedding, and my wife would not go to her wedding. But we're acting as if there isn't a problem, right, and being nice. And she just doesn't know what to do with us, right? And if we were together more, we would probably be able to work this through more, right? But we're not. We see each other, for a couple of days, every couple of years maybe. And so it gets dicey, right?
Yeah.
Or it is dicey and it never gets resolved.
Restrained.
But it's true, right? We love them. We like them. We have no problems with them. We just think that this choice is wrong for them, and we're not willing to pretend otherwise.
Because if you do, then it looks like you're condoning it.
Well, not only, so it's not just because for my own, intellectual honor, right, that I won't do that, although there's a piece of that, right, in me at least. But really, what it's for is love. If I truly love you, I'm not going to pretend that way. I'm not going to lie to you. Right?
It's being authentic.
It's being honest, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to be a, gay basher or anything, right? It's just being honest. Now, the trouble is that sometimes that not everyone handles that tension very well, right? In fact, a lot of people don't handle that tension very well. As I was talking last week, with homosexuality, there is sort of what I call a yuck factor, right? For a lot of us, where we go, ew, right? Well, that's the way we feel. But we should have that response to all kinds of sin that we don't, right? That's just, we still have that one, because it's not a temptation we deal with, right? So we need to get over that. And we need to recognize that we're all, we're all dirty, rotten sinners, right? And some of the best of us happen to be homosexual, right? Oh well.
Now, let me ask you another question.
I know I need to get to Suzelle in a minute here. If you'll follow up, go ahead.
The idea that there are people, supposedly within the church, who are
Could you talk a little
homosexual.
louder, please?
Yeah, speak up, Joyce, if you can.
People who are members of the church who are homosexual, and we know that.
Uh-huh.
If they are honest with themselves and with other parishioners,
Uh-huh.
and everybody is aware of their tendencies,
Uh-huh.
whether or not they act on those, are you required to monitor them in such a way that you would feel it necessary to ask to counsel them?
So I would say that I have the same relationship to someone in that situation as I have to you, right? Your sins are between you and God and me if we're in a confessional situation, right? And there ought to be more of us more often in a confessional situation,
No question.
okay? So yes, I mean, if there is some sort of public scandal about it, then yeah, I'm going to have to act on it,
Yeah, that's
right? Just exactly the same as if, some married guy tried to bring his girlfriend to church, right? Yeah. I mean, that's
I see that.
right. So it's just, but I would say this: it's not something that I need to monitor more
But I don't mean
than anything else, right?
if you see an action that implies
We need to be
something.
consistent.
Yeah.
And therefore we need to, and we need to love each other, which means we need to be able to talk about this stuff. But that doesn't mean we all, like I said, we could all throw our sexual depravities on the table here and have lots of fun, yick, right? I wouldn't recommend that. If it's something that has been, like my friend at Grace Church, Mount Washington, David, and he would not have any problem with me telling you who he is, right? He is just sort of open about it, partly because it's so obvious, right? And partly because he was not always faithful through this, right? And so he was in the lifestyle, capital L, for a while as a young man, and it's something that he has had to overcome. And he wants to help others by making that known, right? And so that's fine, but that doesn't mean that if you are homosexual, you need to let us know so that we can, make sure you're on the straight and narrow, any more than I need to share those things with you, right, about myself that I need to monitor for myself and God and my confessor, right? So, I think I answered your question there. Okay. Suzelle, what did you want to say?
I want to say I know that my brother is in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That he was always a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
My parents taught him to take care of me because he was the boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I take care of him because I was old.
Right.
And that's how it always was. He was always good. He's always taken care of me whenever the opportunity was. and kind
Yeah.
animals.
Yep.
One day, years ago, he had a pain. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and he knew it was appendix.
Mm-hmm.
But he would not, and he knew he had to go to hospital right away, but he wouldn't go to hospital until he found somebody to take care of his cat. And
Yeah.
so then he had
Yeah.
exploded appendix.
Yeah.
It always,
Yeah.
he nearly died, and he was in hospital 11 days.
Right.
But always kind and good and very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a girlfriend at St. Thomas University who was going to become Catholic, so he could marry her. They were very fond of each other. And in fact, she hasn't married since.
Yeah.
She has never married.
Yeah.
A couple of women never married without him, and he loved her. But something stopped him. Something he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, he went to England, and then he went to, and actually I wrote a photo of him.
You could just pass that around, yeah. Yeah.
And then he went to New York. He was made, that's at the Whitechapel Art Gallery at 22 years old. He was vice president, assistant to the director.
Right. Okay.
At 22.
Uh-huh.
And then he was offered the position to be curator of the museum in New York. Well, then I think he found out what he was. Because I never knew until I was in my 40s. Because he told me about it.
Yeah.
But he was always a man, and always strong and good. And then his cats, and then his partner there. Now his partner for 11 years, also brilliant curator, librarian of the Houston Medical Center, and has a doctorate in medieval English literature.
Yeah.
And my brother was similar with all he accomplished. You wouldn't believe it. Father knows.
Yeah.
Father Ray. And I now
met him.
am realizing what my brother went through. What he went through, and I never knew that. What he suffered and lost 40 friends in New York. And that's such a good person. And always
Right.
warrior cook. And on Shrove Tuesday, he used to take pancakes around to everybody.
Right.
But now I know how the church.
Right.
I never knew that.
Right.
And why he didn't go to church and why he was resistant.
Right.
And I'm learning every day. And I saw a program on Tuesday, and I could see in the 50s and 60s you couldn't even get a job because of Eisenhower saying that that you couldn't work if you were astronauts and everything.
Yeah.
And as I said, he was a gourmet cook, a wonderful host. Cooked for everybody, generous, a good man. And I know he's in heaven.
Okay. Yeah. I want to repeat actually something that I said a minute ago, and I want you to hear it.
Yes.
Okay? Some of the best of us are homosexuals.
I know, but you condemned him as if he should go to heaven.
No. That's not what I have said.
Well, you said, reading all those things in the Bible and saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe it's totally physical because we were brought up that way. I said, to me, was the boy.
Yeah.
And we were brought up that way, and always a good person, a
Right.
a wonderful host, generous.
You bring up a good point, which I should probably clarify, which is that when Jesus tells us not to judge, right? This is the kind of thing I think he's talking about, right? I don't know about your brother. I don't know about my grandfather, right? I don't know what they went through internally. My grandfather didn't go to church for most of his life too, right? For different reasons, but you know, I can tell you that there are just lots of great people in the world, all of whom struggle with various temptations.
I don't think it is a temptation. That's physical. Someone just made it that way.
Well, I disagree because I don't think God can tell us. Yeah. Right.
It's not up to us.
That's right. God will judge the state of people's souls. Right. So what our job is to love people, right? And that requires us to try and understand what people are going through, and also to try and understand what God requires of all of us, because it's God's requirements of us are like maintenance on a car, right? If you try and run your car without any oil, it's gonna burn up and die. We are the same way. There's a certain way that humans work, and a certain way that they don't work as well.
It's fun. I'm going to add one more thing.
Yeah.
He looked after my mother till the day she died.
That's great.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know who that is there? That's Princess Margaret.
Oh yeah? That's fun. So yes.
I'm struggling with the word sin.
Right.
Is it a capital S or a small s?
Okay.
But what I've always thought was that in God's eyes, he didn't equate one sin worse than the other. He didn't have them. Human beings have ranked them, sort of.
Right.
Serious.
From a human perspective, you
Yeah.
can see how some of that
But
makes
I think
sense,
that
but not from a divine
God's
perspective.
Sin is sin, that he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Right, exactly.
So he's not saying, God is not going to judge in the orders that we put sin
Right.
in at all. I don't think.
Right.
I think he
Yeah,
knows us.
Yes. He knows us. He knows what we start with. He knows the struggles we go through. He knows, he knows us. Right? And
And we'll never achieve
Hello?
right, we're never gonna get that.
I mean, we can try.
We're never gonna get there until the end, right?
We need
Okay,
to
so
remember
I
that.
am
Yeah.
freed from knowing that he's not going to judge homosexuals any worse than he judges somebody who
Exactly.
gossips.
That's exactly right.
But as God's children, aren't we supposed to love everybody?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
And accept them. We may not agree with what they've said or their lifestyle.
Right.
But I don't think it's my job
Mhm.
here on earth
Uh-huh.
to judge them. I'm going to treat everybody the same.
Right.
Because the
Right.
judgment will come later, and that's not my job.
So yeah, we have to be careful about what we mean with those words, right? So judgment can mean two slightly different things, right? Judgment can mean like passing judgment, right? Like passing a sentence on someone, right? Or it can mean simply having discernment, right? So we need to have good judgment, but we don't judge people,
Right.
right?
That's what I mean.
But what I'm saying is that if we have good judgment, what we're going to say is that this particular thing that people have sort of defined themselves by is a bondage. It's not worse than any other kind of bondage, right? I've got stuff that continues to bug me, right? That's not good. But
That's their bondage, it's not mine.
it is. But here's the difference. Some people will say that this shouldn't be a battle at all, right? And I can't agree with that. It is part of the disorder in the world in which all of us participate, right? If we have the worldview that there isn't that kind of disorder in the world, right? Then we can't tell people, hey, that's bad, right? We have to give that all up.
I don't agree.
Okay.
You know, I have
Yeah.
I have a friend.
But I wants to say something. He's definitely stand up and I'll stop.
Yeah. You go ahead and then let Father talk in a second.
I have a friend, and it seems that they discovered this in the 25th year or somewhere around there, that his son has just declared he is homosexual. And now the father who has always loved his son would let him in the house. And I've seen this happen.
Yeah.
The people,
Yeah.
parents disown their children. And you know, God said, love thy neighbor. If you have to love thy neighbor, can't you love your son?
Yeah. Right. Father, you had something to say.
I sometimes wonder about the difficulty of acceptance
Yeah.
in our day.
Yeah.
35 years ago,
Yeah.
in a small town in Pennsylvania, there was an organist and his partner
Right.
who were members of the congregation, Episcopal congregation,
Yeah.
walked their own home, lived together, invited the congregation to their home, and they were invited to the congregation's homes.
Right.
And nobody said diddly squat.
Right.
Everybody knew,
Right.
and nobody cared.
Right.
And it went on like that for years and years and years.
Right.
Just an observation.
Right. Right. So I mean, there's been all kinds of permutations of this stuff, right? I know of priests who were openly that way, and they were not, on the liberal wing of the church, right? They, so as I say, this is a hard thing, right? This whole question is not going to admit of any easy, cut and dried, one size fits all kind of solutions. But I think that we, as the church, need to be, how do I say this? We need to be a community of sinners, right? Trying not to sin. And forgiving each other when we do, right? So one of the ways that we have really harmed people who have homosexual desires is that we have often made marriage the only really socially acceptable way to live, right? And that's not okay, right? There need to be other options. And people who are not married need to be included in the Christian community much more robustly, right, than most of the time they have been, right? But let's face it, none of us really live that communal life like perhaps we should, right? We all have our own houses and our own lives, and we see each other once or twice a week, right? Well, how are you supposed to support each other really in holiness, right, if that's all the contact you've got, right? So that is exacerbated in the case of people who are not married, right, by the fact that they don't quite fit with couples in social things, right? Not always, sometimes, and we don't, and they live alone, right? Usually, and so we have this kind of weird social construction, and the church has been complicit at times in building that, right? Particularly in the last, 100 years or 60 years, say. After the whole homosexual debate kind of came to the fore, and people who had perhaps the right instinct biblically about homosexual behavior didn't deal with it well because they went, no, that's wrong, so it must be marriage, right? Marriage is the thing. We all need to be married. God wants all of us to be married. Well, maybe not, right? So,
I have a niece.
Yeah.
I persuaded a couple that came here.
Yeah.
And now they are married.
Oh, good.
I have a niece who moved to a state that would marry homosexuals or lesbians.
Right.
And we had visited, and I wish we had had this conversation many years ago.
Yeah.
Because I was rather sleepless, thinking and wondering,
Right.
should we be here?
Right.
Are we supporting homosexuality
Right.
by being in their home and
Right.
knowing that they were sleeping together?
Thank you for your input, Suzelle. I know you have to run to teach. So. Yeah.
Excuse me, what was the original question
Yeah.
that I
So
missed
yeah.
last
So
week?
this is
What are we trying to solve?
Right. So this was the original question was sort of a very specific one about homosexuality. But then from there, we kind of got, in order to answer that, I had to sort of back up and talk about the whole thing biblically, right? So we could see, or at least y'all could see, my thinking on it, because it's so polarized and so polarizing these days that it's hard to get enough of. It's hard to have a long enough conversation to really know what somebody thinks. Right? Because we have these slogans, and everybody interprets what you say in terms of the slogans, and so, I have these conversations where people walk away and they think I hate them and I think they're going to hell, and maybe, I don't know, but what they're doing is wrong and it's bad for them, and that's why I have to tell them that, right?
I think the problem is some people don't think it's a sin.
Well, there are lots and lots of people, there is a theological crisis in the Western church in particular, anyway, right? About, just the basic worldview questions, the basic theology, right? There are, Episcopal priests who really don't believe in God, not the way I do, right? Who are really more like pantheists, right? So they believe in God in the sense that there is a divine kind of force in the universe. Because I've read their books. and they say so, right? I mean, Sally McFadden is a woman who, I don't know where she is now. She wrote a book called Models of God. I don't know her personally. She may be a very, very nice person, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But she actually says, she defines herself as, and she is an Episcopal priest, she actually defines herself as what she calls a panentheist, which is kind of a tweak on the pantheism idea. Right? So I'm not speaking out of school, Venus. I'm not like putting labels on people that they haven't claimed for themselves.
What is pantheism?
Panentheism.
What is that?
It's a little hard to explain. It's like pantheism. Do you understand the idea of pantheism, like an Eastern pantheism?
I'm Peter Pan, and I'm.
Okay. All right. So pantheism is the idea that all is one and all is God, right? So there is this sort of divine force that penetrates all things, right? So that's pantheism. That's what, say, Hindus and Buddhists typically believe. We have to be careful there because there are different schools of thought, right, among people in other religions as well as in Christianity. So we have to be aware of that. But that's essentially kind of the root there. And so I'm not sure that I can adequately tell you Sally McFaig's difference between pantheism and panentheism. But the way she describes it in her book, Models of God, is that the divine bodies forth the universe. So she's explicitly looking for feminine imagery for God, right? And so and all theologians are reaching in a way, right, with their language. Like we gotta give people some grace, but she very, very clearly and specifically rejects the theism of much of the church and Judaism and early Christianity, and she says this is a better way to think about it, right? Is that God is not personal. God is this thing, like everything comes from God, right? Participates in the divine being somehow. It's as if it were all birthed from God, right? That's weird. I mean, it's not weird for academic theologians, okay? But it's weird for most of us. Sounds a little weird, but
For an Episcopal priest, I would think.
for an Episcopal priest, it's par for the course.
Okay.
So,
Well, for a Christian cleric, let's say.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, if what you want to do is be faithful to the teaching of the apostles, if that's your goal, right, then that's not it. That's not really what they taught.
So
So what was the original question?
So that's what I was going to ask
I don't even remember exactly what the original question was, but it got us into this larger, broader conversation. This is the first session when I haven't actually read any new questions, because I knew we spent about 20 minutes on this last week, and I knew that, people were going to have more questions, and so I just kind of allowed them.
When you send me the recording from
Yes.
last week, I'll hear the question.
Okay, good.
Also, Valerie, one of the things that Father made point of last week was that in the ancient world...
Dazzle me with my own brilliance. Go ahead.
I was impressed. I won't lie. In the ancient world, homosexuality was viewed relative to the physical act of homosexual
Intercourse, if that's the right word.
So, but that has changed in the Western world, certainly since the 20th century, 20th century anyway, where people identify as homosexual. In the ancient world, you could conduct you could acts without viewing yourself as, oh, that's what I am. I am a homosexual. Now people do. And so to then say that act is sinful is to go right at the very core of their claimed being. And so you can't say, oh, you're committing a sinful act. What you're saying now to them is you're a sinner.
You're
and
bad.
There's no way out of that for them once that becomes the center of their personal identity.
Right.
How that changes, I don't know.
It's counterproductive these days to just say, hey, that's sinful, stop it. Right? I mean, we could say that, but to kind of tell somebody who is in that, who is trapped in those desires, right, is counterproductive. Right? Because they have been taught by the culture at large to see themselves as defined by that one parameter of their lives. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Looking at Judith's brother as an example, and she talks about
Suzelle's brother.
Suzelle.
Yeah.
Suzelle's brother. All the wonderful things he did, all the wonderful qualities he had.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him, and I don't know but a person today with all those same attributes, despite everything else that they do, what they would claim is the center of their being, a lot of them would claim the fact that I like to have sex with other men is the center of who I am.
Right. And and I just think that's sad.
Yeah,
I mean, and I'm not saying that pejoratively, right? I really do think it's sad. I don't want to be defined by my sexual desires.
Because in that situation, I think for me, until you get in a situation like that, you have no authority to speak.
Okay.
That's what
Well, I've been in that situation, so I can speak.
But you're not homosexual. You weren't born woman or you wasn't raised or whatever.
That's true.
Until you
That's
go
true.
through that, then you can speak.
Okay.
I have no authority to speak on any subject like that.
Okay.
I don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
What I would say is that if anyone wants to be homosexual in this day and age, and I don't think you won't be looked upon as crazy.
As bad or as good?
Yeah, as bad or whatever.
Right.
I don't think anybody really wants to be one. I really don't think so. Now, I've known one or two people's ladies that they have gone through so many men, they had different husbands and they went to their wives.
Right.
And they had turned towards a woman. I do know people like that. But the average person doesn't really.
Yeah.
They don't want to.
We don't.
They don't want to be homosexual.
I agree with you in that sense that we're not judging people, right? It's not our job.
But you wouldn't have like your friend with you?
What's that?
Would you have like your friend?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do have them as my friends.
My sister-in-law was lesbian. She's since passed on. I would argue she was my favorite sister-in-law. I love her very much. I couldn't condone her behavior, but I loved her.
Yeah.
And there's not my wife, who's a very strong Christian, did not condone her behavior, but she loved her sister.
She loved her.
And I don't think we're wrong when we separate those two things.
I really do. I mean, I would hate to define myself by my sexual desires.
And I'm sorry, because my sister-in-law ran into the same thing that you ran into. She knew I was a Christian and conservative, and I think it just blew her mind when we got together, and
You were nice.
and I was nice, and I genuinely liked and loved her.
Right. Right.
It was.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm not defining her as that.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So I just don't want to define anybody by that parameter
So it's just,
alone.
it's a title, and that title has just blown up.
Yeah, I think so.
And, I mean,
I think it does. So sexuality is one of those messed up things for all of us, right? I mean, it gets in there into who you are and how you think of yourself and all of that, right? Regardless of who you're attracted to and who you're not attracted to, right? It gets in there. So I understand why that's a temptation, but I'm going to resist treating anyone as if that's who they are. So.
How many times you tell our children, I love you to death, but I hate your behavior?
Right.
It's the behavior, it's not the person. It's
Right.
the behavior that
Well, and yes, and the behavior all behavior is driven by our desires, right? All of it. So we're not just talking about homosexuality here. We're talking about,
goat cheese.
Yeah.
Crack. I'm
Right.
sorry.
There you go. Goat cheese. If anyone wants to really be a friend,
Can't even have it in the house.
My keys are not mature. That's to borrow yours. You can get in front of
yeah,
me.
no worries.
One thing that disturbs me is that
That's the office.
I've heard psychologists on different talk show programs say that homosexuals are born that way and that they don't think they can change.
Right. Well, my friend David in Pittsburgh thinks that. He thinks, well, I'm not sure he thinks he was born that way, but he doesn't think he can change, right? But he's lived it, and he knows this doesn't work very well. It's not good for you,
Yeah.
and God knows better for us.
Yeah.
So, I'm believing David. Yeah.
Well, physicians know that there's a difference between a male brain and a female brain.
Right.
Huge difference.
Right.
And not all homosexuals, but some that can be a birth abnormality. To have a female brain and a male body.
Or a female-ish brain.
By some genetic
Sure.
weird
Or the other way
thing
around.
that happened in the womb.
Or the other way around, right.
Yeah. So you really can't if that is, it's not probably the case of
It's certainly not the case for everyone, but
everyone, but there are people that
So-
have the wrong.
So here's the other thing I'll say on this, right? And this is, we need to stop. Everybody needs to get some lunch. But one of the things I firmly believe is that as soon as any issue is politicized, it becomes very, very difficult to get good data.
Yes.
All right? And no matter what side you're on, right? Once it's politicized, all the studies that are done I mean, somebody has to fund them, and if somebody's funding a study on that, they would like one outcome or the other, usually. And so it's really hard to sort through all the noise, right, in the information we have about these things. The same is true for any politicized issue, right? I mean, think about the whole border issue right now, right? How do you know really what's happening down there? Well, you don't, right? I mean, you can go down to the border and you can kind of see some of it, but even if you do that, there's a long border down there and you haven't seen all of it, right? So we're dependent on people who have a stake once an issue is politicized. We're dependent for information on people who have a vested interest, right? And that's why you get all these competing studies on this sort of stuff, right? And competing, and we're at the point now where, we don't even know who to trust anymore. So.
That's why God gave all of us common sense. Of all this nonsense going on, you better get common sense already.
Yeah.
And you should.
Yeah.
And that's where common sense comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I read a couple days ago where coffee. You can't just not good for you. It's good for you. It's not good for you.
Right. Fat is bad for you. Fat is good for you. Sugar is bad for you. Sugar is good for you, right? Right. Yeah, who cares? Right. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Well, and I agree with you on that, Venus. So yeah, it's hard.
Do we know how long this behavior has been going on?
Since the fall.
Yep.
The fall of who?
Man.
Not Niagara.
Was that just after the apes or before the dinosaurs?
For those of you listening at home, I'm shaking my head and turning off the recording now. God bless us, everyone.